Hello my quilting friends! My name is Leah Day, and in this video I want to teach you how to load your hoop frame with our fabric sandwich, our backing batting, and free motion quilting practice panel that comes in our free motion quilting starter kit. So the first step to loading our hoop frame is to attach our backing fabric to our leader cloth. Now if you don't have leader cloth, you can always cut your backing fabric 10 to 14 inches longer on both sides. And that's a lot of wasted fabric with every single quilt. So that's why I always use the hoop frame leader cloth. Now, my process is a little bit different. As you can see, I have attached this to a wall. And I've done this simply because I really can't get down on the floor anymore, and I really don't like bending over a table either, guys. So I had this idea, and I think it's gonna work great. I have some high-powered magnets here. These are neodymium magnets with a hole drilled in the center so I can easily attach them to the wall. And this is just a regular galvanized metal L bracket. And I picked this one up simply because it's easy to grab a hold of, it's easy to click onto the magnet, and it's easy to pull it down too. Now, one thing I did was I found the center point of my hoop frame leader cloth. I just folded it in half and I marked that line. And then I pinned in the center and I pinned on both sides of my backing fabric. Now, super important, backing fabric is right side down or wrong side up. So that way the wrong side of the backing fabric faces the inside of the quilt. Now let me give you a close-up of what that looks like. Here is my backing fabric. Now I roll it over so I have the edge of that backing lined up with the edge of that leader. And I've got my fingers under here so that way I can feel that pen and make sure it goes through all layers. So now I'm gonna take my long arm pen, I'm gonna go through all layers and I'm pinning right along that little dashed line. Now I'm gonna move over, and this is why I like to pin those two sides in the center first, so that way the backing fabric's not pulling against me. It wants to stay up here, and now it's just a matter of securing and putting these pins in one by one. So I just move my fingers along, making sure the edge of that backing fabric is in line with the edge of the leader cloth, and I'm placing these pins, inserting them, so that the tip of one pin hits the head of the next one. Now it's time to layer on our batting. This is the batting from the Free Motion Starter Kit, and the instructions say to load this with the flat side to the backing side. The fluffy dimpled side is the side that faces up. So that's the way I'm layering this on. And this is narrow enough, guys, that you can easily see how it's centered. If you're working with a bigger quilt though, you will need to fold this in half, find the midpoint, and line it up with the midpoint on your leader cloth. So I personally like this lined up right against the leader cloth. And the reason is, as the leader cloth rolls up, those very first few rows that we do on our quilt, they can be a little bit loosey-goosey on our hoop frame. I find when I slip my batting down, I end up with this kind of no man's land of fabric at the top, and it ends up being just a little bit weird and kind of hard to get a good clamp and good tension on my hoop frame. So I found I really like taking the batting right against that leader cloth. And I'm doing the exact same pinning where the tip of one pin lines up with the head of the next. And what's nice is doing this on the wall, I can stab in and kind of scrape the tip of the pen against the wall. Might not be your favorite thing to do, but I don't mind it. And that way, that lets me know I've gone through all layers before I bring the pen up to the surface. So now it's time to layer on our quilt panel. And again, if you're working with a really big quilt, you'll want to take this, fold it in half, find that center point, and line that up with the center point on your leader cloth. And that's the center point of everything, right? Leader cloth, batting, backing, everything. But because this is so narrow, I can just eyeball this, as you can see. Now, when I first got started, I would always line up my quilt top right against that line of pins for my batting. I found after I got stabbed a few times with those pins, I really wanted to give myself a little bit more space. Maybe just a few inches, 2 or 3 inches there. And that allows those lines of pins to get kind of sealed up in the roll as we roll our quilt up to advance it on the hoop frame. Now, something I just thought about as I was penning across the side, and that was the importance of keeping your quilt straight across and running parallel to your leader cloth edge. The reason is, if you're doing a really wide quilt, let's say a king or a queen, this hoop frame leader cloth is 132 inches wide, so you can do big quilts on your hoop frame and penning with this method. But you want to make sure that quilt is staying straight across, so that way it's not veering down at an angle. You might end up with some really weird ripples and pleats in your quilt if that happens. So I grabbed a ruler, and a good idea I think initially is just smooth your quilt out so it grips that batting, and that's going to help it stay on the wall. But measure, and I've got 3 inches from my leader cloth to the top of my quilt, and then about every 6 inches or so, grab your ruler and measure it again and make sure that it is maintaining that height. So place your pens further apart first, then go in and pen close together so that the head of one pen is touching the tip of the next. Now you might be wondering about the other end of your backing fabric and what you should pen it to. You can wait on this. I'll be perfectly honest. A lot of times I will get started on a quilt project and I won't attach this bottom leader until I get more than halfway through the project. The reason is I don't need it. I have more than enough quilt to clamp on my hoop frame, and I don't need this extra piece of fabric until I'm right towards the very end. So if you want to go ahead and attach your leaders, all you're going to do, find the midpoint, begin pinning there, both sides, and then pin along that edge the exact same way that we did before. So here we are with the quilt on my hoop frame, and I'm going to take this long end and slot it through my machine so it is out of the way. And you can see I've already started rolling the quilt up onto this backing fabric. Now I've got my 2 rows of pens here, and I like to roll that up so that way I don't even have to deal with them. And I'm probably going to actually clamp covering up that first row of pens on the quilt itself. Now this is what I'm doing for this narrow little practice sandwich, this free motion quilting starter panel. I might do something a little differently if this was a real quilt, because obviously I would want to stitch to that edge, right guys? So understand that this is really my loading process for this panel, and I definitely plan on updating this and sharing more tutorials on using your hoop frame and using it with bigger quilts. So be looking forward to that. All right, this is looking good. I put my clamps in place, and this is why we have this big, basically it's a rope inside of that leader cloth, so that way it provides some stability as we bring our elastic straps over. So this elastic strap, you just clamp it to this part. There's like a lip here. You clamp it to that lip on that plastic clamp, and then you can tuck your extra strap away. So there's kind of an accordion pleat on this little plastic piece. So I'm going to slot through there and slot through there. And that keeps my extra length of my elastic strip nice and tidy. Now I like to make sure that the rope is on top of that clamp. That is making sure that the bulk of that rope is vertical rather than to the back, which would limit my harp space. Anything behind here is going to limit how much space I have to quilt in on my machine. So just tweaking that just a little bit might buy you 1/2 inch to 1 inch of quilting space. Now let's talk about this front bar. Because this is such a narrow panel, I think we can get away with just 1 of our clamps. No, let's go on ahead and use 2. These go straight on like this, and I'm going to go on ahead and clamp both. And you know that the front ones, because they're longer and they have this ripply texture. Now, we don't want this too tight. We really want it to be bouncy tight. So I'm actually going to click this one way, and what you do is you just rotate. You want to just gently pull on those edges, and that's how you can use that ratcheting system. There we go. That looks good. It's tight, but it's not super, super tight. So now let's clamp our side leaders. For a bigger quilt, you're going to pin this, and then you're going to take the side clamp and go straight down and lock either the quilt or this leader cloth in place. Because this isn't long enough, I'm going to rotate this all the way around until these ends are face up, and I'm going to grab my clamps. And I haven't used these in a while, so they're a little messy. So I just need to untangle those cords. And they have these little clamps here on the ends, and they slot right into the bottom of that side clamp. Really cool. And that slides forward and back, so that way you can get enough space to slot those in. And then you have these little stoppers, so you can extend that as long as you need them to go. I don't think I need very much length, honestly, guys. And you could even just take the leader cloth and fold it over and then clamp to that. That's perfect. And that'll get nice side tension on both sides. Okay, our quilt is ready to go. And this is some instructions in the Free Motion Quilting Starter Guide. And that is to stitch a basting line around your quiltable area. I really like that. It's something that I do myself, and it allows you to see how much space you have to quilt in. You might actually be surprised. You have, this nice open area, but depending upon the harp space in your machine, you might not be able to get as close to this front rail as you think. You also might not be able to get as close to the back rail as you think. That depends on your foot and a lot of other factors. So I have set this up, and I have stitch length 1 on my Sure Stitch regulator. And so this is a nice wide basting stitch, and I'm just moving slowly and carefully down that line. Now, of course, if you are free motion quilting with a foot pedal, you're going to be setting this up just a little differently, probably setting down, pressing on your foot pedal. And just remember that whatever has worked for your sewing machine for free motion quilting is what is going to work really well for quilting on your frame. Now, as for my settings, I just turned my machine on and started stitching, which means that this is stitching with feed dogs up and a stitch length of probably 2.5 millimeters. And that's just fine. I have not found that to be a problem with moving my machine. In fact, actually, I found that whenever I did drop my feed dogs, I had some tension and stitch issues. So this is what I like to do. I am using a convertible darning foot here on the machine with a ruler foot attachment. And I absolutely love that foot for quilting on my frame. So that's it, ready to go. In our next video, we are going to start stitching some of these practice lines. I'm going to show you how to get the most out of your free motion quilting practice panel. So that's it for this video. A little homework on this project. Pull out these practice tracing sheets and give them a try. The more we form these shapes, the more they get logged into our minds, and the more easily our bodies are able to form them smoothly and evenly. But I promise we're gonna get tons of practice actually quilting too. So if you'd like to join in the fun and pick up a free motion quilting starter kit, come and check it out at leahday.com/FMQ start. Until next time, let's go quilt.